Welcome back to the File X channel. February 2023. A trial was held in Dundee, Scotland, United Kingdom. The chief constable in charge of the case expressed these emotions in court. This incident shocked and horrified all of us. The depravity of the crime surpassed any form of moral corruption I have ever encountered in my 30 years of police service. The same can be said for my colleagues. The actions of the perpetrator showed no regard for human life, pain, or suffering. Today I want to share with you what happened in Dundee, Scotland, United Kingdom, and why even officers with 30 years of experience struggled to confront a crime so unforgivable. First, let's get to know Benny Lynn Burke. I'll refer to her as Benny for brevity as we go through the details. Benny was born in 1995 in Quezon City, Philippines, a city with a population of 3 million people, making it the most populous city in the Philippines. Benny's family consisted of her parents, one older sister, one older brother, and Benny herself. Among the 3 siblings, Benny was the only one who had the opportunity to attend university. Despite this, there was no resentment among them. On the contrary, they were very close. Benny's older sister, Sheila, worked to support Benny's education. Meanwhile, her older brother was always ready to stand up for her. If anyone bullied Benny at school, he would go there to defend her and demand justice for his younger sister. Life carried on peacefully until 2015, when Benny, at the age of 19, met a man named Lexington Burke through a dating app. Lexington lived in the UK, and as you can see from this photo, he was more than 40 years older than Benny. She was 19, and he was 59 at the time. Benny and Lexington began dating in 2015, with one living in the Philippines and the other in the United Kingdom. It's uncertain how often they could meet in person. Nevertheless, they maintained a strong relationship, and Benny even became pregnant. The two got married on Sama Island, Philippines, on July 28, 2018. 1 month after the wedding, their daughter, Jellica, was born. At that time, Benny couldn't yet move to the UK to live with her husband, so she stayed with her baby daughter and parents in the Philippines. About a year later, in August 2019, she finally moved to England, the homeland of her husband. At first, life seemed difficult, but with her intelligence and resourcefulness, Benny quickly adapted well to living in England. Not only did she take good care of her daughter, but she also managed to work at a care home and sell vacuum cleaner parts in her spare time. With her youth and good health, she wanted to earn as much as possible to send money back to her family in the Philippines to help cover their living expenses. Benny supported her family financially for over a year. This financial assistance helped her loved ones back home overcome various challenges. Neither Benny nor her family could have imagined that. Not long after, Benny would no longer be able to support them. Benny's relationship with Lexington worsened, and their family life fell apart shortly after she arrived in England. Eventually, Benny moved out with Jellica and found an apartment in the suburbs of Bristol, England. When asked by her friends, Benny said she would never give up custody of her daughter, even though being a single mother now made it much harder for her to continue supporting her family in the Philippines as she had before. Benny kept in touch with her older sister Sheila in the Philippines daily, sharing with her what was happening in her life. She told Sheila that despite the challenges she was facing, she remained active in a Facebook group called Mums and Bath, a community of local residents helping young mothers. Benny was a kind-hearted person. Even though she was struggling herself, she still tried to help other mothers who were in more difficult situations than her own. Then, in February 2021, nearly 2 years since Benny had moved to the United Kingdom, At this point, divorce proceedings with Lexington were underway, and they had agreed that Benny would have custody of their child. After leaving her husband, Benny confided in her sister Sheila, saying, "I've changed. I feel free and more comfortable now. Leaving Lexington seems to have been the right decision." But after all, Benny was still only 25 years old. Despite her broken marriage, deep down, she yearned to be loved, just like any other woman. So, Benny logged onto a dating website called Filipino Cupid, hoping to find a suitable partner with whom she could build a future. After a few days, Benny matched with a man named Andrew, who lived in Dundee, Scotland, a location that, while still in the UK, was far from where Benny was currently living. Andrew was 50 years old, but as in her previous relationship, age was not a significant concern for Benny. Andrew shared that he was a software engineer who had previously been married to a Japanese woman. They had 3 children together. He had lived in Japan for some time before deciding to divorce and move to Scotland to live alone. Benny and Andrew talked for a while and became close friends. They exchanged messages and phone calls and, though unable to meet in person, grew to understand each other more and more. Later, Andrew suggested that Benny come to Scotland to visit him. However, Benny had work commitments, and despite Andrew's kindness, he was still a stranger she had never met, so she wasn't ready to accept his invitation. But the distance no longer seemed to be an issue. One day in February 2021, Andrew drove for 8 hours straight, leaving his home in Dundee, Scotland, and traveling to the city of Bristol to meet Benny in person. There, Andrew dated Benny and even spoke with her daughter, Jellica. They spent time together until February 18, 2021, when Andrew invited Benny and Jellica to come to Dundee, Scotland, to visit him. By this time, after spending several days with Andrew, Benny had developed some feelings for him. Furthermore, she learned that the neighborhood where Andrew lived was not under travel restrictions due to the pandemic, so she also wanted to give her daughter Jellica a chance to go out and explore. And so, riding in Andrew's car, Benny chatted excitedly about a bright future with a romantic relationship awaiting her in Scotland. This trip was not initially planned for an extended stay. When Benny set off for Scotland, she didn't bring any luggage. Moreover, the following day, February 19, 2021, was the scheduled visitation day for Jellica's father, Lexington. Benny had planned to visit Andrew and return on an evening flight, which would take only about an hour and a half, thinking there wouldn't be any issues. On the way, when Andrew stopped the car by the roadside to take a quick nap, Benny made a video call to her sister Sheila, telling her that she was having a pleasant trip. Strangely, besides Jellica, who was a toddler, there was another little girl on the car, appearing to be around 7 years old. The identity of this girl wasn't disclosed, so I'll refer to her as Emma for now. She might have been a child that Andrew had brought along, though the exact details were unclear. Regardless, on this trip there were 2 children: Jellica, 2 years and 7 months old, and Emma, 7 years old. Benny and Jellica happily enjoyed the scenery, taking pictures together, and even taking photos of Andrew. But the next day, February 19, 2021, Sheila could no longer reach Benny, even though they had the habit of communicating daily. Benny didn't answer any calls or respond to messages from her sister. At the same time, Lexington went to Benny's home to meet their daughter, but found no one there. Benny didn't answer her phone and gave no reply to his messages either. Another day passed. On February 20th, 2021, Sheila, who was in the Philippines, received a message from Andrew. "Are you Benny's sister?" Benny met a man at a coffee shop. probably through a dating app, and she and Jellica went with him to Glasgow. Really? Benny? But why isn't she answering my calls? Benny told me that she and her ex-husband argued a lot over custody. She said she was afraid the police or someone else might try to find her, so she turned off her phone and ran away. Sheila, of course, found this strange. If her sister had such plans, she would have told her. Sheila replied to Andrew, "Is my sister still alive? Scotland is a very peaceful place. No crimes happen here. Don't worry. Benny is safe." When Andrew didn't send any further messages, Sheila grew increasingly anxious and messaged again. "Hello. Has something happened to my sister? It's a long story, but anyway, don't worry, she's fine. Please, tell me what happened to my sister." After this, Andrew sent Sheila a video of Benny. However, upon watching it repeatedly, Sheila felt that the video seemed to have been recorded a long time ago. Following the messages with Andrew, Sheila waited for a call from Benny for 2 more weeks, but received no contact. Then Andrew also became unreachable. So, where was Benny? The sister suspected something was wrong. On March 1st, 2021, she reported Benny missing. The police in Dundee, Scotland, could not immediately locate Andrew, as Sheila only knew of his existence but couldn't provide the police with any details about who he was or where he lived. The only clue the police had been from Sheila's statement that on February 18th, 2021, Benny and Jellica had traveled from Bristol to Dundee, Scotland. The police began investigating all vehicles and reviewing surveillance cameras used to monitor vehicles traveling from Bristol to Dundee. Eventually, a suspicious car was identified. The owner of the car was none other than Andrew. On March 5th, 2021, the police arrived at Andrew's home at 21 Troon Avenue in Dundee. Andrew slightly opened the door and said, "My daughter is bathing and needs to get dressed right now. You can't come in. Besides, I'm self-isolating at home. What's going on?" However, the police managed to get a glimpse into the living room through the partially opened door and saw a child, fully clothed. Sensing that something was off, the police issued a warning and entered the house to conduct a search. Within just 3 seconds, they were utterly shocked by what they saw. The house was in an inexplicably chaotic state. A mattress was haphazardly placed in the living room, and the furniture was in complete disarray, giving the impression that the house was under renovation. The kitchen was piled with pots, pans, forks, and spoons, in no particular order. Some floor tiles had been oddly ripped out, and there were construction tools and machinery lying around. Meanwhile, the little girl the police had seen earlier was lying on the mattress in the living room, watching cartoons. The police asked Andrew, "Do you know Benny? Where is she now?" "I killed her. She's under the floor." "What about little Jellica?" "She kept crying for her mom, so I buried her next to Benny." Andrew had taken the lives of Benny and Jellica, a little girl who was just over 2 years old at the time, and buried them under the kitchen floor, pouring concrete over their bodies. The police immediately arrested Andrew and charged him with murder. But who was Andrew, and what kind of person could commit such a heinous crime? Additionally, what was his motive for doing so? Andrew Innes, 52 years old, was born in Germany and had no prior criminal record. At the age of 24, he moved to Dundee, Scotland, in the United Kingdom for the first time and graduated from university. Afterward, he worked for a world-renowned gaming company, Rockstar North. Later, Andrew married a Japanese woman. and they had 3 children together. The entire family moved to live in Japan. Then, in 2019, after divorcing his wife, he returned to Dundee, Scotland. This was around the same time Benny had just moved from the Philippines to settle in the UK. As a programmer, Andrew was highly skilled in design and technology, making him one of the most valuable engineers at his company. However, instead of using his skills to benefit the company, he used them for his dark purposes. Specifically, he utilized technology to create a program that connected data from 34 dating websites and collected profiles of women. He then listed his ideal type of woman in an Excel file, scoring each profile. The more the profile matched his desired conditions, the higher the score. The one non-negotiable criterion was that the woman had to be a single mother with a young child. Benny, by chance, had entered her profile on the website Filipino Cupid, one of the 34 websites from which Andrew harvested data, and she became his target. But why didn't Andrew care about the age, occupation, or even the face of the person he was dating? Why did he focus on whether the single mother had a child? What I'm about to share is a depraved truth. Andrew's motive for committing these crimes was not to harm or kill the mother. All his flirting and actions were solely to serve one purpose: to prey on the child. And even more horrifying, I will now recount what happened to Benny, Jellica, and Emma, the child found in his house. It's a narrative so shocking that, as previously mentioned, the police stated they had never encountered such a horrifying case in their 30 years of service. The heinous crimes on the night Benny arrived at Andrew's house. While Andrew was being prosecuted, a new challenge arose. Benny's and Jellica's bodies needed to be found as soon as possible. However, this was a daunting task for the police because Andrew had buried the bodies, poured concrete over them, and even finished tiling the floor above. Excavation had to be conducted in a way that caused minimal damage to the victim's remains, making the process extraordinarily difficult. A team of experts, including anthropologists, archaeologists, and geologists, arrived to assist with the excavation. The heavy presence of law enforcement on Troon Avenue in northern Dundee, with dozens of police officers and forensic staff at the scene, drew public attention. The Scottish police cordoned off the street with barriers around the house, and a tent was erected in the front yard of the large detached property. This operation signaled to the public that this could be one of the most severe cases in history. It took 2 weeks to recover the victim's remains. On March 19th, Jellica's body was finally discovered in the kitchen at a depth of less than 1 meter. Benny's body was found beneath it, naked, wrapped in a garbage bag, and covered with blankets and tarps. One. Victim: Benny Lynn Burke, 25 years old. An autopsy revealed a large stab wound on Benny's chest, measuring 158 mm deep, and multiple head injuries. Pathologists determined that the combined effects of internal bleeding and head trauma, likely inflicted with a hammer, caused her death. Police recalled that during the initial search of Andrew's house, they had recovered a 1.5 kilograms hammer. This tool was undoubtedly used to inflict the injuries that led to Benny's tragic demise. When interrogated, the police asked Andrew, "Why did you do it? Why did you brutally murder them?" Andrew provided his justification. He claimed that Benny and her daughter had come to Scotland on a Thursday, and he had planned to spend the weekend with them. However, during a conversation, he discovered that Benny was still in contact with other men. This led to an argument, during which Benny allegedly grabbed a sharp tool typically used for sushi preparation, approached him, and threatened him. Andrew claimed that he acted out of fear and stabbed Benny to death in self-defense. However, the police quickly recognized Andrew's explanation as a weak attempt to justify his actions. Additionally, another critical piece of evidence came to light. A witness at the scene of the crime, who was also a victim, provided crucial testimony. 7-year-old Emma recounted the horrific events of that night in vivid detail. Emma's account is harrowing, especially considering her young age. According to her, Benny was cooking dinner in the kitchen when Andrew suddenly attacked her savagely. The monster then retrieved a samurai sword from his study and stabbed Benny. But it didn't stop there. He used a hammer to strike Benny's face repeatedly until she died. Andrew then wrapped Benny in blankets and left her body on the kitchen floor for 3 days. Even more horrifying, he didn't kill Benny's daughter Jellica immediately. The reason was unthinkable. Andrew committed heinous acts against the 2-year-old child for 3 days. Two. Victim: Jellica, 2 years and 7 months old. The autopsy revealed that Jellica, a toddler, died from suffocation caused by pressure on her mouth and throat. But even more horrifying than the cause of death was the forensic evidence. Andrew's DNA was found on Jellica's body. According to forensic examinations, Jellica was killed 3 days after her mother. This means Andrew subjected the child to unspeakable abuse during those 3 days. When asked why he killed Jellica, Andrew chillingly replied, "Shouldn't a child be with her mother? So I killed her too." He claimed his actions were out of concern for the victim, an utterly revolting justification. At this point, the police understood that the more they investigated this case, the more horrifying details they would uncover. Yet they had no choice but to continue pursuing justice for the innocent victims. Indeed, during a search of the house, police discovered used condoms in the trash, containing Andrew's DNA, as well as DNA from both Jellica and Emma, the sole surviving victim who had endured horrifying abuse. 3. Emma, the lone survivor, 7 years old. When questioned about Emma, Andrew remained calm and showed no remorse or emotion. He simply claimed that Emma was his daughter. However, investigators soon uncovered the truth. Emma was not related to him in any way. During the investigation, police learned that Emma had been staying at Andrew's house for 2 weeks prior to the murders and had endured horrific abuse throughout that time. Andrew had kept Emma confined in the house, tying her to a leash and allowing her to move around like a dog. What's even more disturbing is what Andrew told Emma: "I'll give you 2 10-pence coins each time we do that." The result was devastating. Emma tested positive for chlamydia, a common sexually transmitted infection. Yes, a 7-year-old child had contracted a sexually transmitted disease. How difficult must it have been for a 7-year-old to endure such horrors? Another question immediately arose in the minds of the police. How did Emma end up in the hands of this monster? In reality, when the police found Emma, she had been reported missing. But that is all that has been revealed about Emma's identity up to this point. I believe this is the correct approach by the police, because it's best for this poor child's identity to remain undisclosed and for no further curiosity about her to be stirred. Emma will face countless challenges in the future. Of course, she will require therapy, and even after reaching adulthood, she will endure immense psychological trauma. This is not just her personal pain. It's a deeply ingrained emotional wound, compounded by the horrific events she witnessed, events far beyond what any normal person should ever have to endure. From a recording of the police's private interview, Emma's words once again pierced the hearts of the investigators involved in the case. The 7-year-old recounted everything she had witnessed, describing how Andrew used Jellica to satisfy his depraved desires, and the moment when little Jellica was killed by this monstrous programmer in disguise. Just one of Emma's responses was enough to halt the interview for quite some time. No one could believe what they had just heard. Emma said, "He invited us to play hide and seek, but during that, he killed Jellica. I'm not sure where he did it. I glanced towards the bathroom door, but he had already shut it, so I couldn't see exactly what happened after that. I'm sure Jellica was in the bathroom, and I should have saved her, but I couldn't do anything." Even at such a young age, enduring immense physical and emotional suffering, Emma's courage is both heartbreaking and remarkable. We feel sorrow and gratitude for her bravery in providing crucial evidence, which gave the police even more grounds to convict this murderer. In 2023, Scotland's most anticipated trial. The first trial. On January 31st, 2023, the first trial of Andrew Innes began at the High Court in Edinburgh, Scotland. During this session, the jury listened to a 90-minute recording of Emma's interview. Prosecutor Alex Ben described the recording of the child as one of the most heartbreaking pieces of evidence he had ever encountered in his entire career. As for Andrew, he admitted to killing Benny and Jellica. However, he still insisted that Benny had attacked him first, so he killed her in self-defense. In response to this justification from the murderer, the court presented evidence showing that the victim had been struck on the head with a hammer before being stabbed with a samurai sword. This proved that Andrew had intentionally struck Benny's face multiple times with the hammer before stabbing her. When accused of concealing the victims' bodies, Andrew claimed that the reason he buried Benny and Jellica was for their sake. Andrew explained that he handled the bodies with concrete, not to cover up the murders, but because I dug a proper Christian grave for them and buried them according to Christian rites before finishing the floor. I even prayed for them. I didn't simply bury them. He further justified that initially he had planned to bury Benny and Jellica at sea. However, coincidentally, his house was undergoing renovations at the time, so it occurred to him that he could bury them there, making it easier to pray for them. Also, during the trial, when accused of killing Benny to abuse Jellica, Andrew vehemently denied the accusation. The third trial. On the third day of the trial, as new evidence emerged proving that Andrew had committed premeditated murder, he changed his testimony. He added another reason for his brutal actions toward Benny, stating that her face resembled his ex-wife's, while her figure reminded him of his ex-girlfriend. This resemblance, according to him, triggered uncontrollable anger. The judge asked, "What happened in your past that made you so angry, just because Benny resembled people from your previous relationships?" Andrew replied, "My ex-girlfriend left me, and my ex-wife cut her hair without my permission. That memory made me so furious that I momentarily lost control, grabbed the samurai sword, pinned Benny to the floor, and stabbed her." Despite all these reasons, Andrew insisted to the very end that this was not a premeditated murder. According to his shameless defense, he said, "If it were a planned murder, it would have been handled more neatly. A body buried under the floor, encased in concrete, and tiled over. wasn't neat enough. The fourth trial. Andrew blamed his actions on mental illness. In the fourth trial, Andrew suddenly told the jury, "I heard voices. Someone told me to kill Benny." This was his attempt to argue that his mental health was unstable. During the trial, Andrew was even hospitalized for drone disease, a condition requiring treatment with steroids to alleviate its symptoms. He had previously been prescribed these medications at the hospital. Taking this opportunity, Andrew's lawyer argued that Andrew had been on steroids at the time of the incident and claimed that the drugs had driven him insane and caused him to act uncontrollably. However, forensic psychiatrist Dr. Cowan expressed his skepticism, stating it was unlikely that Andrew had experienced a steroid-induced psychosis at the time of the murders. Although this is a rare side effect of steroids, there wasn't sufficient evidence to prove it was the cause of the killings. Dr. Cowan further explained that, in the past year, no patients at the hospital had experienced psychosis due to steroids, and most of his colleagues had never encountered such a case in their careers. Ignoring all excuses, the prosecutors charged Andrew with premeditated murder. They pointed out that he had even written a web program to search for victims, deliberately lured his targets to his home, and went out to purchase tools to dispose of the bodies after the murders. This was confirmed when the police examined CCTV footage from the B&Q store near Andrew's home. The footage clearly showed that on the day Benny was murdered, Andrew went to the store to buy garbage bags and other tools to wrap the bodies of Benny and Jellica. Based on medical evidence about Andrew's mental state, the judge instructed the jury to return a guilty verdict for both counts of murder. And on February 6, 2023, after 5 days of trial, Andrew, who sobbed at the defendant's stand while presenting his defense, still denied all charges. The jury, consisting of 8 men and 7 women, took less than 2.5 hours to declare him guilty. As a result, Andrew was sentenced to life imprisonment, with the possibility of parole after 36 years. After the verdict, Andrew showed no remorse. As the police escorted him out of the courthouse, Dundee residents heavily criticized the criminal, shouting and cursing at him. Yet, he smiled at them. The haunting aftermath of an unbearably tragic case. Throughout the trial, with the support of the Filipino community in the UK and the British government, Benny's family was able to come to Scotland and attend all the court sessions. Witnessing Andrew face justice, Benny's father spoke through tears. "Benny, she was the hope and light of our family. That light was cruelly extinguished." Her sister Sheila shared in helplessness that she still calls Benny's mobile phone every day, just to hear Benny's voice on the voicemail. Perhaps this pain will never subside for those who always loved Benny. Detective Chief Inspector Raham Smith, from the main investigation team of the Scottish Police, said after the trial that the murder of Benny and Jellica had shocked and horrified all the officers involved in the case. He added, "In nearly 30 years as a police officer, the depravity shown by Andrew Innes goes beyond anything that I or my colleagues have ever witnessed before." The jury also stated that many of Andrew's crimes were not revealed to the media. However, due to their professional responsibility, they had to listen to every single detail of the grim truth. Some of the jurors were even unable to look at the face of the perpetrator after the trial ended. The Scottish court and the British government announced that the jurors would no longer serve as jurors in future cases due to the difficulties they had witnessed in this trial. Meanwhile, after being sentenced, Andrew calmly said, "If you guys had come just 24 hours later, I wouldn't know what happened to Emma." Finally, when the news first appeared in the media, the people of Dundee, Scotland, were shocked and deeply saddened, as the target of this crime was a child. The public commemorated the deaths of Benny and her mother by leaving candles, flowers, dolls, and banners in the park. In addition, the local people gathered and held a memorial service. This case is perhaps the most horrific among the thousands of crimes committed through dating apps. I say this in case someone criticizes Benny for using dating apps. In fact, using dating and dating websites is very common. It's just that Benny was unfortunately one of the unlucky victims at the hands of a person who had planned this depravity from the very beginning. Even more unfortunate, Benny and her daughter were not given a proper and respectful funeral, as expected. Just days before Benny's family was preparing to bring her remains from Scotland back to the Philippines on June the 7th, 2021, Benny's family home in the Philippines was completely destroyed in a fire. In an interview with the media, Benny's father, Ben Aquino, and her sister Sheila revealed the pain of having to remember Benny in their dilapidated home. Sheila said, "It's really painful and difficult for us to think about how and where we could place her to remember and pray for her. We have no light, no door, no windows, or anything else. We only have a shelter with a few chairs and candles, and we found a table to place her and her pictures. We prayed together and remembered her, but it wasn't a proper funeral. It wasn't what we wanted for Benny. But we had nothing." Still, Benny Lynn Burke's family held a memorial for her and little Jellica. Looking at the makeshift altar surrounded by the charred remains of the house, one can't help but feel heartbroken and sorrowful for the two unfortunate souls. Even in death, they did not escape their tragic misfortunes.